You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers about hikers for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi guys, and welcome back to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis, sponsored once more by Triple Crown Coffee. And I think I may be having a bit of a midlife crisis myself this week, because this is going to be a very long show. For some of you, I know that is exactly what you want to hear, but for others, you're going to be shouting at me to stop before the end. So our main guest is actually a critic of the show. Well, more accurately, she's a listener who is a hiker and has a great personal hiking story. But she objected to me telling Kate's story in our Woman of a Certain Age segment because she didn't agree that Kate should have been out there. And when I received her beautifully written email, I felt compelled to have her on the show to not only tell us why she objected, but while she was here, tell us about her hiking. As you've often heard me say before, I love these strong, independent women. Her name is Lily Gelfars, and Lily will be on soon. On the subject of people who shouldn't be out there, of course, I went straight from Kate to Bounce. If you recall last week, I mentioned that I thought Bounce seemed quite down. This week, you're going to learn why. And after Bounce, because I really needed to extend an already long show, I've got a truly amazing story from Erin Mackenzie. Erin was on the show very early in 2017, so quite some time back. If you haven't heard what happened to Erin, then you'll really want to hear this. And finally today, there is the first chapter of our brand new book reading. It's Keith Foskett's Balancing on Blue and his personal Appalachian Trail story. This week, Keith introduces his cast of characters. So, before we get on to all of that, there's this. When I used to get up in the morning on the Appalachian Trail, I would have sacrificed my firstborn for a good cup of coffee. Instant was a bit, blah, but how much more satisfying it would have been to have had some backcountry beanbags from Triple Crown Coffee. They do a light, medium and dark roast. In fact, you can get a mixed six-pack of their three flavours, named, not surprisingly, after the three trails in the Triple Crown, the AT, the PCT and the CDT. I love the backcountry beanbags because they are perfect for your favourite 2-cup stove, and they make a proper 16-ounce cup of joe. Alternatively, you can cold soak them overnight and try it that way. Check them out at triplecrowncoffee.com. You won't be disappointed, and you'll never want to drink instant coffee again. I bought myself a coffee grinder this week and ground up some Triple Crown Coffee beans for the first time. I normally have Dunkin' Donuts, but there really is no comparison when you grind beans freshly. Beautiful. And thanks, by the way, to all of you who've written to tell me that you've tried out the coffee bags with your camp stoves and how much you've enjoyed it. So let's hear from Lily now. As I say, she wanted to criticise me, and I was happy to give her the platform to do it. I really don't mind getting told off when I'm told off so beautifully. Here's Lily. Now, you know how I like hearing from listeners and how I try to find out more about them? Well, today's guest, Lily Gelfars, is a case in point. Lily's here today because she sent me a complaint letter. Hi, Lily. How are you?
I'm well, Steve. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good.
And you were giving me not a hard time, but actually, well, you give me a hard time about me giving a platform to Kate or Phoenix in our Woman of a Certain Age segment. And I have to say, it was the best written, the most articulate put down that I've ever received in my life.
Oh, I'm glad to be of service.
Yeah. So we had an exchange of views, and we still seem to be friends, and I wanted Lily to come on the show and share her stories with you all. We're going to come back to the letter later. Lily's one of very few SOBO hikers we've ever had on the show, and it seems amazing to me. You went SOBO in 2017, I believe, didn't you?
Yes. July 1st, 2017, I started.
July the 1st. Okay. And when did you finish?
I believe it was December 19th. So it was like just under 6 months.
Wow. So I've often wondered what it must be like. Actually, that's not true. I've never wanted to hike in the Georgia mountains in December. I'd imagine the weather was pretty fierce by the time you finished, wasn't it?
It definitely was. I would say fierce is a good word. Freezing, frigid, miserable would also be a nice way to describe it, but also beautiful at times. I was, funnily enough, I was looking at the pictures after you and I, decided to do the interview, and there was a decent amount of snow in the Smokies, in Virginia, and I think everyone, regardless of which direction they go or when they start, does get snow in the Smokies in some way. But we were, you know, as it seems most people are, so I don't feel too bad, super unprepared for it. You know, I had been switched to boots at the time, but my two hiking companions at that time both had trail runners. You know, we were plastic bags. There was no water anywhere because everything was frozen. So we did the melting of the water in the pot. And funnily enough, I think 2 or 3 days before we, you know, summited, I'll put that in air quotes, Springer, the weather did clear up, and I think I had a T-shirt on and shorts when we finished, and then it started raining immediately. So we threw on the rain jacket. So we didn't finish in the snow or anything, but it was definitely...
Why did you do air quotes? Why did you do air quotes for summiting at Springer? Because well, you still were summiting, but yeah. You know how I feel about this because you listen to the show, yeah.
And that was really why I did it. You know, I mean, it's not a summit in the sense of you poke your head up of a peak or anything, but, and I think I said this before, I do, wherever you finish, even if you're just walking, you know, let's say you came into Boiling Springs, which is maybe the flattest section of the trail, it would still be a finish. You know, maybe you're not climbing anything, but metaphorically summiting, I guess, the end. You know, it was more of a slight incline up to Springer, and yeah, so that was the air quotes, really. But it felt like a summit. It was very exciting. It was pretty cloudy. We didn't really see anything, but we saw the plaque and took some pictures.
It's still pretty darn great to realize that moment, that all those hours and hours and days of hard, not labour, but hard work, really, in many ways, is over, isn't it? And it's quite a substantial moment. I remember we were speaking to one of our guests, I think, her name was Dawana Blue, and she said that it was just as exciting for her, she thought, as it would have been if she'd gone up Katahdin. Yeah. Because your Katahdin hike up Katahdin wasn't even part of your AT, was it? Because you had to actually, it was your approach trail, wasn't it? That's quite an approach trail.
It was the approach trail, and to be perfectly honest, I was I didn't know anything about it. Like, I didn't want to, not that I didn't research, I knew about the trail and, you know, what you should bring and everything, but I really didn't want to see too many pictures because then you sort of have an idea of what it's going to be. And then if it doesn't match your expectation, it could be either disappointing or sad or whatever. So I really didn't know too much about the mountain itself. And then whenever we got to the part with the rebar, which I did not even know what rebar was at that point because I'd never really experienced it. I was
learned it.
I was like, there's no way I'm going to do this. This is a terrible idea. Like, who does this? And there were, I think, maybe 5 or 6 other people. I don't know if they were even doing, you know, maybe they were just doing a hike. And it was getting cloudier that day. So we're getting to the rebar part. And everyone was just, there were 6 people like, should we do this? Are we stupid? Like, we could go to the bar, you know? And we did it. You know, I did it. I didn't like it. I was terrified. And then, you know, you keep thinking you're almost to the top and then you never are. And it was a whole thing. And then it ended up being great. And then, you know, got to the sign and ran back down because I was terrified of getting caught in a thunderstorm.
Yes, of course you were, yeah. But it's interesting, actually. I've never thought of it before. Just when you were saying that, it made me realise you would have been so much more prepared for it had you gone Nobo and that been the end of your hike. That would have been an epic ending. So that thought process, it must have been quite scary if you were thinking, my gosh, is it all like this?
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, like starting in Maine, it kind of was all like that. And that's why I think after you finish Maine, even New Hampshire wasn't as bad as Maine in the sense of like scary things, just because there were a lot of people, just families on vacation.
Sure.
I remember being somewhere in the Whites and we saw like a father and a son in flip-flops. You know, they were probably staying at a hut. They were probably doing like a 2-mile hike. And we were like, they're in flip-flops. Like, there's no problem here. What's the worst that could happen? Like, so, you know, we have to walk back to the hut with no shoes. But in Maine, it was obviously not like that. And yeah, there were definitely moments of, which I'm sure everybody has, like, what are we doing? But that was compounded by the fact that we're going really slow. So there were about a week between, you know, getting to towns for most of Maine, like 6-7 days.
Yes.
So then when you do hit sort of New Hampshire and Vermont, you're like, oh, this is a lot easier. You know, like we can get, you know, stop in places for every 3 to 5 days. And I think that was actually, I liked starting with the bigger gaps between sort of resupplies because it was then easier to continue, as opposed to if you start with every 2 to 3 days in the South, you sort of get used to carrying a lighter pack, whereas we started with such heavy packs because of the food that it just got better and better, lighter and lighter.
Yeah, it's still, whichever way you go, I'm sure it's an awesome journey. But we actually started this conversation at the end of the hike, which I shouldn't really do. So take us back to why you were there in the first place. Have you been a hiker for most of your life?
So not most of my life. I have been, you know, I've enjoyed doing sports for most of my life in some capacity, you know, nothing exceptional in high school. And then I have worked since I was about 21, worked in restaurants, which is pretty physically demanding as well. You do a double shift running around outside. I think
and mentally demanding with some of the customers you have to meet, I'm sure.
I can't even. It's very nice not to be in one right now during this time, I'll say.
I'm sure,
because people are not being nice to their waiters.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, we would track ourselves on like a pedometer, and in a double shift, you walk 13, 14 miles just running back and forth. Yeah, wow. I mean, one place I worked mainly was very large, with a large outside. So it was definitely physically demanding. And I started, I think, in my mid-20s. I'm 33. My father had run the New York City Marathon a bunch of times, like 5 times. Right. And I was like, if he can do this, like, I should probably be able to. Yeah. And so we did it. I started running. I'd never really run regularly. I'd obviously run in sports training, but not as just, it seemed like a punishment rather than an enjoyable activity. Yeah, it is kind of. And so I did it to do the New York City Marathon. They have this 9+1 program where you run 9 of the races affiliated with the marathon, which is the New York Roadrunners. You volunteer one shift, and then you're automatically get entry to the marathon. Right, so I did that, started running. And then I think I actually heard someone on your show say this that was, I don't know if they were a professional athlete or a runner, but they said, they were doing whatever their sport was, which may have been running or ultra running. And you're doing everything, all this training for like one day, for one event. Yes. Whereas when you're doing a hike, like every day is the event. So I sort of, with that idea in mind, like not consciously, I guess, but now that I think about it, I wanted to do a hiking trip because it seemed I had always traveled a lot. Like I'd work for 6 months, travel for 6 months, spend all the money, like go back, make more money in a restaurant situation. And a friend of mine had done an Outward Bound trip. This is like 2010. And, I heard her talk about it. And I was like, wait, you did a what? Like, I thought that was for wayward youth, I guess.
Yeah.
Would be the appropriate way to say it.
Same here.
and no, they have them for adults. And, I found one, it was in Maine and New Hampshire, actually, in sort of the Whites. I think we went over like Mount Moriah, the Wildcats area, the Imp Shelter was part of that trip.
The Wildcats are tough.
And it was crazy. So I was, I think at that time, let's say the cost of the program for 7 days was like $1,200. And I was like, if I flew to X location and did all the things you do on a trip, it'd probably be about the same. And this could definitely, you learn a skill. So I did it and I loved it. And then I never did it again for 5 years because I lived in Manhattan and there's not too much hiking and I was just running. And then I guess it was 2015, I was thinking about hiking again. I was like, I'd started doing like day hikes around my area. So I was living in the city. So, they have a lot of hiking. I wasn't hiking on the AT at all, but sort of like the Hudson Highlands, maybe an hour, 15 minutes from Manhattan, you could take the train. Sure. They have one hike, it's called Breakneck Ridge, which is really, really cool. It's like a rock scramble for the first mile. And then it's just beautiful. Like you kind of see that in the Bear Mountain area. It's sort of the other side of the river.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So it's gorgeous, like epic views. Very popular hiking spots because you can take the train there from the city. Mm-hmm. And I was doing more hikes like that. So I then decided to do another Outward Bound trip. This one was in Utah and Colorado. And after that, I was like, okay, I want to do this. Like, enough of this going to cities. Like, this is cool. I feel
and paying money for it as well.
Yeah, no, right, exactly. But that's the thing. Working in a restaurant, I think, is a lot different than other jobs because the money part is just like fluid. You go into work, people like you that day. It's a Saturday, and you walk out with like $400. So it was you work for 3 days. Okay, there's the cost of the trip. Obviously, then there's the other, you have days in January where you literally make $20, and that is a miserable week. So it's just always, it's funny, and it allows you the flexibility. But right, I was like, I feel confident, like I know the skills to do this. And I do think those programs are great. Maybe not for everyone. Maybe people think I'm an idiot for paying in the first place, and you should just try it for trial and error. But, you meet very interesting groups of people. The trip that I did was like very much people in their 20s and 30s who, it was during a spring break time, who wanted to go on a trip. Maybe none of their friends wanted to go hiking. So they were like, I don't know what I'm doing. Let's all go together. And it was really fun. It was, Utah and Colorado was beautiful. I would love to go back there. But, and so then I had done that 2015. The next summer I did the Tour de Mont Blanc in Europe again.
That sounds great, by the way. We had somebody on the show talking about that, and that sounded awesome.
It is. I learned about that one because there was a New York Times article that was like 10 days, 3 countries, and a whole bunch of cheese. And I was like, that's it. Like this is it. This is perfect.
And some wine.
Travel, yeah. And that one, I camped the whole way. So I brought my tent.
Really?
They have campsites. Wow. I think there's like a misconception that you have to stay in the huts.
Yeah, I seem to think that was in my mind. Yeah,
definitely don't. I stayed in, I want to say it took me 9 days. It's like, 9 nights maybe. So 10 days, 9 nights. I did stay in one of the I think they're like refugios is the name there. And just because I wanted to know what it was like. And so, it's 40 euros. You have like a bed in a very packed dorm with tons of other people. And then there's dinner and breakfast included.
Like being on the Camino.
Exactly.
Which we will come to later.
Yeah. But it was really cool. There was I did it in August. I was teaching. I was a public school, high school special ed teacher at the time. So I had the summer, to travel I was in grad school, traveled for a little while. And that was why that hike is a very summer hike, because you are pretty high up in the mountains. Sure. I'm sure some people do it in the winter, but it was just like the most epic views of anything I've seen to this day. And it's just really fun because everyone there loves just walking. It didn't seem like hiking how it does in the AT, like all these very strict definitions. It was like you're walking around in this beautiful landscape, and then you get to the peak of, a really high point, and you can get a ham and cheese sandwich and wine.
You get a croque monsieur or whatever they call it,
exactly.
something like that. Yeah,
it was amazing, and they had like chocolate, and it was amazing.
So what made you want to commit to 6 months on the trail, though? Because this is a massive commitment, whichever way you look at it. And people listening in, one of the real reasons a lot of people don't do this, they just can't give that timing, can they? And also going SOBO, particularly for a single woman. I'm interested why you would choose to go the quieter route. Yeah,
so definitely I came to the AT just because it was the closest trail. So I didn't have to deal with any of the logistics of flying, out west to say the PCT or the CDT. Yeah. Was kind of familiar with I didn't really know too much about the trail itself. And I don't know that I really knew before maybe the 6 to 8 months prior to hiking that people did the whole thing. Like that wasn't something that was in my conscience, in my sphere of consciousness, if you will. Yeah. But, you start Googling stuff, and the Tour de I was like, maybe I could do something in Europe. And then just in terms of, I came upon the AT and I said, okay, so you do it from like March through September. And I thought I had been teaching. I did not like teaching. It was not for me. It's a great job for others. So I was planning on going in the following March, and then, you do more research, and I was like, oh, I can go in July. Like if I hustle out of if I run out of the door, I can basically start hiking immediately. So I did. I finished. I think I stopped teaching on like the 28th, 29th, took the bus from Port Authority to, what do you do it to like Midway? It was a whole thing to get up there from New York. And then, took one day in Millinocket. They had like a 2-night deal where you get there, you have like a day to, I don't know, organize your gear and throw out half the stuff, and then went to Catan. Yeah, so it was a pretty quick turnaround. But the reason for going SOBO was just I really wanted to go, and I thought, I'm not going to have a job, so I'd like to do something now as opposed to just sort of, I don't know, maybe either working in a restaurant and quote, I don't know if it would be wasting 6 months. I would obviously be making money, but I had saved money.
It never felt like it was wasting 6 months, did it? When you were out there?
No, the hike, no. If I had waited till March, I would have felt like from June till then, to March, I just would have kind of bounced, either worked sort of purposely. I really just wanted to go. And then once I learned that you could go, I was like, okay, like now I really want to go. And, I'd sit there on my lunch break.
So you were there for virtually the opening of Baxter then, weren't you? Is it open on 1st of July, something like that? Or maybe it's June?
No, because people it might be June, because people definitely started a month ahead of me.
And loads of people talk about, because you clearly had the physical strength nailed down. You've done a marathon and stuff like that, although hiking is very different to any other activity. So you still have to get the physical strength, but that comes with time. Mm-hmm. But loads of people talk about the importance of mental strength for a through hike. And that's something none of us really know if we actually have until we're there. Are you good at keeping yourself motivated, and did that help you on the way?
Yeah, I think it's also what have you done before? And I really do feel, and anyone who has worked in like a grueling restaurant environment can attest to this, there is nothing harder than getting yelled at by overprivileged suburban people about, sauce on the side or the lack of fizziness in a particular beverage. to like make you mentally strong. So I just was so happy that I wasn't spending another summer like running around in 95-degree heat, you know, bowing to the whim of all these people. And I'm not trying to be funny, even though it's a little funny, but it's also, you know, kind of, people need to be nice, man. But I do think that, you know, working in that sort of environment, and I had prior, you know, also been working as a bilingual special ed teacher in the Bronx, which was not, you know, it was also its own sort of taxing mentally as well. And I was doing toward the May and June prior to leaving, so of 2017, I was working in both jobs. So I was like, leave the school at, I don't know, 2:45 or whatever time we ended, and drive really quickly in 20 minutes, like change in the bathroom, and then start working in the restaurant. Wow. So I think like the 65 days before going on the hike, like I worked every single day. It was crazy.
That gave you physical preparation as well then.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so when I got to the trail, it was really nice, you know, and you've said this and many others, it's nice to just have one thing to do. And everything you have is like, you know, I know what I was going to do that day. I didn't have to drive, which is great. Yeah. I hate driving, period. And it was beautiful. And I think, yeah, there were definitely times where it was mentally taxing. And I'd say that was more in the South when it was getting cold. You know, it was just cold. And that was not really something I'd expected for some reason to that extent.
You weren't expecting it to be cold in December. Good Lord.
No, yeah. I don't know. It's the South. I'm from New York. But yeah, so I don't know. It was just.
So you got started, and for the first couple of weeks, you had a friend with you, didn't you?
Yes. The first like 10 days.
And how did you feel when she left? Because you'd obviously been hiking kind of as a team for that period. Did you notice a change in how your hike felt?
I mean, I was definitely excited to sort of be on my own, I guess, you know, because if you go with someone, it's more of a vacation in the sense of like you're together, you know each other. Yeah. And I was, you know, I was excited. I was nervous because this is it. Like now you're, you know, in the first part, I think going south, it's almost like a trial run. You do the 100-mile wilderness in Katahdin. You get to Monson. Monson is like the best place in the whole world. And you have everyone.
It is after the 100-mile wilderness.
Oh my God. Well, and you also have, it's really cool because you have all the northbounders who they're about to finish. So they have a certain excited energy. Yes. And you also have all the southbounders who are like, okay, I made it through this, you know, remote-ish location. Although apparently it's not as remote as I thought. There are roads.
I slept in 2014. I slept back the first 4 days.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know you could. If I knew, you know, it's hard to say. It's nice to say like, oh, I didn't do that. But if I knew, who knows?
Yeah. So when your friend left, did you then start hiking with others?
So
other people.
I'd say within 3 hours of leaving Monson, I ran into a girl. I mean, if that even, a girl that I'd met during the 100-mile wilderness. We hiked together for a few days. Then she and I split up. I guess it was in Caratunk. There were different shuttles that you could take.
Sure.
And so I took the 9 a.m., she took the 11. And sometimes it's just 2 hours is enough to not see someone for, you know,
for 1,000 miles.
A week and a half. Yeah.
That's right.
So that's basically what happened. I ran into another girl. She and I hit it off really well. We were sort of, it was funny. I will say one thing about going southbound that I did not consider is that a lot of the people are from the South hiking home.
All right. Interesting.
I'm from New York. You know, I've lived in France for a year. I've lived in Mexico for 2 years. So I've lived in other countries. But I think in New York, you don't realize until you go to other states that it's kind of has its own way of being. And it might not be the same way as the rest of the country. Just when you cross the Mason-Dixon
line, you notice that as well.
Well, and there was a lot of people. And I was like, I don't really, you know, and I was living in Manhattan for a large part of, you know, I went to college there for my master's and undergrad. So, you know, maybe 12 years of living in the city. And then you come and you're meeting all these different people. And I really liked that about the AT is I met a lot of American people and had probably been pretty close-minded about them. Like, I'm from New York. We know what we're doing. And then you meet these people. And I was like, oh, other people can be okay. You know,
yes, they can
not all
be,
of them, obviously. But it was definitely eye-opening for that reason. But I met a girl who was from England and she'd lived in London. And we were both like, you know, you meet a person, you're like, oh, you get me. Like, we're both from cities. We, you know, are open-minded, if you will, and probably believe certain things about leadership that others might not be believing, current climate. So it was really nice. And we hiked together to New York. So that was about 800 miles, I think.
You actually went home then, didn't you?
I did. I got off to go, you know, to switch out some gear, like make some changes. I had to go to a wedding. I just wanted to visit. So I'd say I was off for about 7 days. Girl I'd been hiking with decided she was no longer a fan of hiking, so she flew back. I remember
she'd done all the hard stuff. She'd done all the hard stuff and she was going home.
Yeah, and that's part of it. I think, especially meeting so many northbounders that are so excited to get to that point. You're like, well, if they've hiked 1,300 miles at this point, and then more. So you meet them in Vermont, they've hiked 16, 17. And you're like, and they're so excited for this part. Does that mean the rest of the trail is bad? Because they don't seem too enthused. They're like, oh, this is what we've been waiting for. Yeah. And I think that was very misleading because when I enjoyed New York to Harper's Ferry for various reasons. Number one was I was alone for most of it, which was fun it was cool. I had never hiked alone like that. But then it's the most beautiful. I maintain it's so beautiful down there, and I preferred that half of it. Like visually, Virginia was amazing. The Rhode Highlands were amazing.
I agree with you. Virginia is so. They talk about the Virginia blues. I think it's only because it goes on for so long you don't feel like you're making progress. But there's some great views in Virginia. Some of the best views, in fact.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, at that time I was with a nice group of people. I said a friend of mine and his dad were hiking together, and then my other friend. So there was 4 people. We were kind of hiked from more or less Harper's Ferry to Roanoke or Daleville. He got injured, but. It was definitely fun to hike with a group because I'd hiked with an individual, but not with a group. And it was just, there's so many fun things. You have the Devil's Backbone, you have the what is it, 3 Ridges or 3 Sisters, some hardish mountains.
The Devil's Backbone was it? Well, I was thinking about the brewery. But
oh, that's 100% what I was talking about.
Right, okay.
That was the highlight of the trip. It was so fun.
We stayed there 3 days.
Yeah. Oh no, And we were there. You could camp, but it seemed like they were building a lot more facilities.
Oh yeah, they got a brick
like showers and stuff,
shower house, and it's great.
No, it was. I loved it. They were so nice, and we didn't really know what to do. We got to the road and literally standing for a couple of minutes, and a guy pulled over. And he was like, "You going to the Devil's Backbone?" We were like, "I guess." And he was like, "Oh, I'm a bartender. Hop in. Like this happens all the time." So he just offered. We weren't sure. And we ended up staying the night. We were like, should we? In retrospect, I don't really have many regrets, but I do wish I'd stayed there another day.
Yeah, you could have. Yeah.
Amazing.
And you're one of actually the only people, I think probably the only person we've ever had on the show who never took or was given a trail name. Why was that? Did anybody try to give you a trail name?
People, so fun. I'll tell you exactly why. So as I said, my name is Lily. It's a flower. If you want a trail name to evoke some sort of nature thing, it seemed overkill to further naturify my moniker,
Right.
However, in the 100 Mile Wilderness, I remember it was the Antlers campsite. It was like a really nice lake, super gorgeous. And there was, so hiking south, there was all these camps of kids and teenagers, and we're sitting around and they love fires, right? Like teenagers love building fires. Hikers I never built a fire. I was too tired. But these kids had built this big fire, so they're sitting around. They were fascinated. They're like, wow, so like, what's your guys' trail names? And I was like, oh, I absolutely do not have a trail name. And there was this other girl who was hiking south. I don't know ever what happened to her. And she was like, no, you have to pick a trail name. Like, that's what you do. Like, don't you want to be somebody else? And I was like, I don't really. Like, I'm okay being a person who, decided to do this. I don't know. It just seemed very, and the way that people were adamant about like you must do X thing on the trail. Like I don't think that you have to do anything. Like
you sound like you do sound like the sort of person who when someone tells you got to do something, I say I ain't doing that.
and I did meet a couple of they're out there. There were a couple of other people that also didn't have trail names, and I think it was funny. I said of the maybe 2 of the 3 people that I would still be that I am still friends with today. 2 of them did not have trail names, so that was maybe the sort of person that I was attracted to.
You attracted around other people without trail names.
But people definitely want to give you a trail name, what I mean?
Yes.
And I have a lot of tattoos, so they're like, "How about tat?" I'm like, "How about no?"
But I'll tell you what it does though. It became a bit of a contest. If you could give a trail name and they adopted it, I love that. I love the fact that somebody took on my. I've told the story before, and I'm not going to tell it again, but I've given 2 trail names, maybe 3 actually.
Okay.
And I love the fact that you can do that. So you finished at Springer and you went back home,
I did.
Not to teaching, but you'd really gotten the bug and you got kind of down, didn't you, about it?
Yeah, I mean, I was sad that it was over, and, I got back to New York and I really just wanted to do another something,
really?
Like I really wanted to, and I think I said, because it was right near Christmas, everyone was became frantic pretty quickly, and myself included, about like, wait, like, are we going to keep going if we don't finish? You know, and then there was sort of the pressure to get home by, you know, not necessarily Christmas, whatever holiday, but sort of the holiday season. I wanted to be home. I did not want to be freezing in South Georgia or, you know, in the South AT on a mountain by myself. Like, Merry Christmas. Like what? Like making a little tree out of pine needles or something.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, so I had, you know, and everyone had kind of booked travel home or had arrangements to get picked up. So it was like sort of ended in a, you know, frantic
it never ends.
way.
It never ends well, does it? I don't think it ends. I was disappointed both times with how I separated from people I was hiking with.
No, 100%. And I remember this. I had booked an Amtrak train from Atlanta to New York because the whole, you know, it was $700. The flights were crazy because it was so close to Christmas.
Yeah.
And I was, you know, I think I stayed one night in a hotel in Atlanta. Just, you know, I got in at 7 and then left the next day. And I was like, we should have just stayed another day. Like, and then you know, maybe a friend of mine had gotten an injury, so she finished 2 days after with a larger group of people. And then I felt silly for even care. I was like, Christmas is, you know, I'm not religious. It's just a nice time to be with your family for me. But I'm sure we would have seen each other a couple days after. And then you know, it was kind of sad in that way that I didn't finish with some other people that I had met because it was a pretty big group. But, you know, I've stayed in touch with people and it doesn't end up mattering. My one good friend ended up coming to New York on a whim, maybe 2 weeks into January. And I didn't finish with, unfortunately, and we'd been hiking together for a while. And it was so great. I was like, okay, so it doesn't have to end. It's like maybe that hiking period is over, but, you know, there's the internet, obviously, and people can chat that way and you can hike together again. And I think that was sort of a nice realization.
And you did, didn't you? You went again.
I did.
You went again. When was that? Literally the next year.
Yeah. So I think I got home late December 2017 and like within a week I found a flight I flew into Paris, February something, the first week of February in 2018. So like less than 2 months. The flights to Paris from New York at that time are like $120. It's basically free. Yeah. And then I had researched what hikes to do in the winter, and the Camino de Santiago came up. And again, didn't really know too much about it, did some research. You know, at that point, hiking wise, I felt I would be fine. And it did seem like it was one of the trails that you could hike fully in the wintertime. And so I went and I did that.
Did that turn out to be true? Is it an easy one to do at that time of year?
I mean, I wouldn't say the one thing, so weather-wise, there was definitely snow a couple of times. Again, the day that I started was 7 degrees Fahrenheit. I was like, what am I doing? This is terrible. It's really cold. But within maybe 3 or 4 days, it was beautiful. And so weather-wise, definitely, there were some... But the problem there is that not everything is open, and so you don't really camp on that.
I was thinking that, and they're very different hikes anyway, aren't they? Did you enjoy the different pace of the Camino?
Oh, I loved it. I don't know. It's hard to say like if I like hiking here or there better because it's obviously too different to compare.
Totally different, yeah.
But I really enjoy the like, you know, just like the mentality of there's no, you know, rush to do it. It's not competitive. And in fact, people, you know, I had just come off the AT with this like, oh, if you don't hike 20 miles in a day, like you're the worst. And like this very sort of like, you know, toxic, like competitive atmosphere, which is dumb because you should be walking in nature. And people there were like, I'm just going to hike 5 miles today. There's a church that I'd really like to see.
That's right.
And I was like, wait, what? But you're going to lose it. So you're going to take like a day off. And they're like, no, I'm going to hike to the next town because there's this thing that I want to see, and that's the point.
But it's like an extended cheese and wine party, though, isn't it? Because once again, you got cheese and you got wine. Spanish wine is great as well. So it was terrific to do that. Beer
is amazing. I mean, and it's just, I thought it was great. Again, a lot of the towns, you know, so I had this little book, I don't know the name of it, but it's this little blue book about the Camino that, you know, they lay it out in, I think, 33 days. Very followable. So I did it a bit faster because a lot of the towns were closed. So a lot of restaurants were closed. And the towns are like abandoned. Yes. They don't even open in the off season. So like you'd go in I did carry more food on that than probably you would in the summer. Wow. I've heard in summer, winter, fall, or summer, spring and fall, there's just little stands everywhere and you can pretty much just carry nothing.
Well, I went later that year. I went in 2018 as well. I went in October, though, and we did actually get snow towards the end of it, which was pretty fierce. I must admit, I didn't like that much at all.
Yeah,
but you must have enjoyed it because you went again. You went again this year with your boyfriend.
I did.
How different is the Camino Norte, which is the one you did this year, to the Fronce, which is one that we both did in 2018?
So, I mean, if I really had to, I thought the Camino del Norte was. I know I said earlier that the Tour de Mont Blanc was the most beautiful thing, but this was the equally most beautiful.
Oh, really?
trail.
Wow, really? Nice.
So it was amazing. It was, at least from what we did. So we started, again, we got this same ticket that I took 2 years ago into Paris. And the way you do that is just don't bring trekking poles, because then you bring the bag on the plane, and then they have this great store in France and Spain called Decathlon, which is basically like REI, but affordable. And, you buy trekking poles for €4.99,
yes.
and they're great.
Yes.
So, and I think that was what's cool as well, is you have people of, it's not sort of limiting financially, because that gear there is really easily obtainable. But yeah, so we started in Irun, which is kind of on the border of France. I guess the France side, you take the train to Hendaye, and then you walk into Irun. And then your first day is this big day that you end in San Sebastian, which is like food, I think it has the most Michelin-starred restaurants.
Oh, really?
I don't know.
Fantastic.
It's just like food capital. The food is ridiculous. It has two sort of beach areas. It's just the best. It's like, the Pincho, which is like the tapas capital of everywhere in the whole entire universe. And the food is amazing. So that's your first day. It's beautiful. So you're on the water the whole time for the first, I don't know, 5 or 6 days.
And how far is it, that one? Is it shorter than the Francais?
I think it's a little longer. I think it was maybe just under 900 kilometers, which was it's about the same distance.
Oh, nice. But you didn't finish, and this leads us neatly back to the letter, actually.
Hey.
So why did you suspend your Camino, and what was the thrust of your argument as to why I shouldn't have had the segment with Kate? By the way, before you answer that, I should point out that when Lily wrote this to me while Kate was still on the trail, and when I told her that Kate had finished because she was injured, Lily could not have been more concerned and caring about Kate's injury. So it was not about Kate, it was more about me. So what was it, Lily?
Right. So we walked, I guess it was 307 miles. The town that we ended in was Gijón, which is, again, so you're still on the beach. It was beautiful. No injuries, everything. I mean, it was like the most amazing trip. It was nice to do it with somebody. This is the first time I've hiked with someone. And I think when you go with someone that you love, it's exciting. It was amazing. Definitely recommend it if you actually do like each other. But so we, and obviously we left very early February. We'd heard of the coronavirus. It was, people were sort of aware of it. No one seemed to be too concerned in the sense of like, you shouldn't travel anywhere. Neither did we. So we left. We were in France for about a week. Then we got to Spain. And then, as we were hiking, we're reading the news, obviously, and we were getting more and more concerned. And Spain, kind of like New York at the beginning, was slowly but surely like getting more cases. But everyone we spoke to in the towns, are you worried? And they're like, no. Like, this is fine. And similarly at home, everyone was like, wash your hands, whatever. It's going to be fine.
Sure.
And slowly but surely, every bar we went into or every hotel, like the TV is on and you're just hearing like coronavirus. And we're like, maybe this is bad. And we personally started to feel uncomfortable just having a good time when this terrible thing is going on. I just felt like it didn't feel like the appropriate time to be hiking. We were concerned that, it seemed like a lot of people were asymptomatic. We're both healthy. I feel like I would be the prime candidate to get it and not know. And
you were probably hearing from home as well. How New York was starting to get hit by them, wasn't it?
We were definitely hearing. I remember texting or messaging with my parents, and my mom was saying, just be careful. There was just and even to this day, there's such a lack of information and clear information that even they were saying, I think it doesn't seem good, but as long as I'm sure you guys are doing the right thing, you're probably safe, and we were walking through these semi-abandoned towns.
Yes.
So we're not seeing anybody, we're not hugging random strangers. We really would leave the hotel, get food at a supermarket. We kind of decided maybe within a week of leaving, let's not go out to eat anymore. Like if we, let's not go into a restaurant.
Sure.
We managed to find a big bottle of hand sanitizer in a supermarket. It was like the one left. And we were lugging that around for the 2 days before, and we were like, what, just didn't really know what was going on, lack of clarity. And then there was a forum we Googled it really to know if the organization in charge of the Camino, if they were recommending anything. They weren't yet.
Right.
And then we decided to finish in this town of Gijón. We were like, let's leave Spain, because Spain just seemed like it was increasing rapidly.
And there was always the worry about getting back, as well.
Well, right. And that was, this proclamation on the news was like, flights will be canceled from Europe, immediate, like starting Friday. And by the time we saw the news, it had been clarified a bit. But, you can look up on the on the Times website or any news source. There was very confusing messages. People were in Europe thinking they wouldn't be able to get home the next day if they were U.S. citizens. Yeah. People were spending like thousands of dollars on tickets, from Paris to New York, $5,000. And we were like, well, we certainly didn't budget for that. And I certainly, I have a credit card. It certainly can't cover that. So, we tried to be as calm as possible. We were like, all right, let's get to Portugal, which seems at that time had 40 cases in the whole country. Spain was getting, into the thousands. This is like second week of March. So we took a bus. This was actually kind of sad. So we took a bus from Gijón to Santiago de Compostela. So we saw the cathedral in a different,
Nice.
So we were like, okay, this is it. This is sad. We don't really want to see this. And then we took another bus to Porto, and then ultimately again to Lisbon. And Lisbon to New York was the flight we were able to get.
Right.
I think there was 5 days between like the decision and the departure. And Portugal was... Spain, everyone was still out and about having the best time ever. When we got to Portugal, everything was pretty much closing. The only people out and about were tourists.
Yes.
Just listening to the languages we sat outside at one place and got something to drink and some food the very last night. And there was like a French couple, a British couple, us, a Spanish couple, and an Italian couple. And I was like, okay, so all the Portuguese understand what's going on.
That's right.
We're the only stupid people like having wine.
There's a bit of a clue there, yeah.
Yeah. So, and then, we just basically the last day stayed in the hotel. Like, to us, it didn't feel fun anymore. And there were, we were sort of following online this forum of other pilgrims, I guess. I don't know. It feels silly saying pilgrims sometimes. But, that's what they call them.
That's fair enough. That's what they're called, yeah. So Pellegrino.
Exactly. Which I have here.
So you got back home. So you got back home and you started listening to my show, and you obviously heard about Kate. And then, so go for it. Why was I wrong to put that section on there?
Yeah, and I think I'll just say first that I did understand someone reporting on something. I do think you do have a duty to tell people what's going on, and I think that people are out there, whether I agree with it or not. So. Yeah. I almost do prefer, now that, thinking about it, to know, because otherwise they get to do what they want, which is, sneak around. And so I guess I had a few objections, and I do have...
You listed them all.
I did. Well, I have time now to fully express my grievances with many things. And I think it's important especially when it's something that you do like, and I really do love the show, to sort of express your feelings, because that's how people get bitter, is they don't talk about things. And then, otherwise... I promise
you, I've valued your point of view, and I responded to it, hopefully. And we were both respectful with it. At the end of the day, it was my only argument about it, because you knew I had reservations myself about it in many ways. Right. And I wouldn't have done it myself. However, I still feel that because there are people out there, and I'm doing it again with somebody else now, the Kate's back home, and I think it's, they're out there, they've got a story to tell. Their story isn't necessarily the one everybody wants to hear, but at the same time, this is happening. And there are lots more people on the trail than I ever believed there would be. And that's really shocked me.
It really is. And I think it sort of speaks to the fact that people in this country still don't believe that the coronavirus is real, which is terrible. And so I think, a couple of things that I thought with regards to why I disagreed with, people, not her specifically at all, obviously.
I know you weren't saying that.
But just in general is there were some, it's just a lack of humility on the part of the people that continue to hike, because they're, as much as people are saying they're going to get all their food in a zero contact or minimal contact way. They're still going out, and you hear these people saying they're not going to sleep in shelters. But they seem to still be in the shelters. And, there was a couple of times when you were speaking with her that she was exasperated that, a restaurant wouldn't let them eat inside, or she was exasperated that she couldn't find an Uber. So I think it's very easy prior to hiking to say that you're not going to engage with all the amenities of the trail. And then you get out there and you're like, I do want to stay in a hotel. I do want to take an Uber.
Yeah, it's almost impossible not to. You're right. It's almost impossible not to.
And so I think that people kind of go into it, and it's a lofty idea. Like, I'm really going to hike from Springer to Katahdin without interacting with anyone. But that's not this trail. There are trails like that. That's not this one. I thought that, what really kind of rubbed me the wrong way, there was with the caretaker, the altercation in Pennsylvania. And I think one of the things I said in the letter is that it does to me, the people that are hiking, I'd be very interested to see the demographic breakdown. I am just going to guess, just because largely the AT hikers are white. I don't think that Black people or people of color would be treated in the way that these white hikers are. I think they would be treated a lot more poorly. And I think
you're right.
I think that the people who are hiking now are, exploiting this white privilege that the amenities are for them, and the police and emergency services are geared towards us. I am white. And I think that, and I'm not saying consciously, but I think that you kind of know that if you call the police and you're a white person on the trail, like, yeah, they're going to come save you. And I think that people are going to help these hikers, because there are people on the trail who care about the hikers, regardless of who they are. But I do think that to choose to go on this hike is, and I've read, articles about this as well, where other people definitely agree with this sentiment, that it's already a very white, what do you call it? Sport, and not necessarily sport activity. And to continue is to just sort of ignore everything that's going on in the world. I think to not watch the news, people are saying, oh, I'm on the trail. I don't even know what's going on in the world. That's really privileged, because the communities that the virus is affecting are, minority communities. So you're kind of saying, this isn't going to hit me and my family. I can just tune it out. And I think that that's a problem, in many areas of the world, education, housing, everything. But with regards to the trail, I think that another problem I had was, it's just disrespectful to all the people working in the hospitals. It's disrespectful to all the people still working in restaurants. It just sort of says my needs and desire to have this cool adventure supersedes like the hard work that you're doing, putting yourself at risk.
I don't disagree with hardly anything you said there, but I'm not going to go into it other than say that I feel I was just reporting on something that was going on there. However, I like the facts. I've got a lot of emails on this, surprisingly last night, and the vast majority support people being on the trail, not the other way around. And I find that interesting. That's why I wanted you to come on and express yourself, because I think it's a viewpoint, and I'm sure people will either agree with you or not agree with me, and they will let me know. And I'll pass on some of those things to you as well, because I think it's a dialogue to have. I totally take your point, and I've often said that this is a white trail. And I've been lambasted for it myself in the past. So and you can't help that. Happens on Facebook anyway. Yeah. I just think it's important to talk about it. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying anybody shouldn't go. I'm just saying that they are going, and if they are going, I was happy to report that they were out there. But I promise you, I really value that letter more than you could think. I read it 3 or 4 times to make sure I wasn't missing any nuance there. And you were very, very nuanced about what you were saying. So you weren't being shitty with anybody. You were being fair. And I really appreciate you not only sending me the letter, but coming on and telling us about your hiking adventures. And
I thank you for taking the time to read it closely, and for
you even wrote
allowing
that to me. You even wrote that to me. Thanks for reading it.
I probably did. Yeah. No, and I do appreciate it. No, and I think that, at least from as a listener's point of view, I think that you've expressed yourself and explained the reasons why you showed it, and I think it's really up to the individual people to make their own decisions. Sure. Although about whether they agree with her or not, obviously. But I do think, there was an article just the other day in Outside magazine about the first guy that finished, first or second guy that finished through hiking this year.
Right.
I don't know if you've seen it.
No.
And the fact was that he had to run from the police a couple of times, and he lied a bunch of times, and he snuck around and things. And to me, it's just, why does a grown man in their late 30s, and most of these people are adult, if it's a 12-year-old breaking the rules, that's fine. But, most people that hike aren't career criminals, although there are a couple, I've seen the specials. They're just people who are doing this thing. So why, that's what it seems. If you have to flout all these rules and, disobey local regulations, and can I say one other thing?
Of course.
Which is that another reason, and this is a more personal, maybe selfish reason, that I think these people who decided to hike are doing an inappropriate thing, is that, in places like New York and New Jersey, which got initially assaulted by this coronavirus,
Sure.
Which now is happening in other parts of the country. And
welcome to Florida.
I have a friend who lives in Florida, and it's terrible. And so I think that, we stayed inside. I ran laps around the block instead of going to the parks. They never closed fully the parks, and you can camp there. But, a lot of people in this area who did want to do things like go camping in New Jersey, go camping in Massachusetts, you cannot camp in those places, even to this day. Like, it is closed by the governments of the states. So for people to literally stroll in from, Georgia or Harper's Ferry, it's like, you can't even drive your car there if you live 10 minutes away. So that was kind of what struck me as very, I guess, self-important. It's like, well, I flouted the rules. Like, do you go around breaking the rules? I'm not like a huge rule person or anything, but I've camped illicitly as well when you have to. But I do also think that it was very sort of like a slap in the face to people who have been just sitting in their house, walking in the local park for the 97th day in a row because you can't go on these cooler trails that are closed. And then you see these people, grinning at the top of Katahdin like, I made it. And it's kind of, to me, it's just like, wow, you did that, didn't you? You went for it.
I can tell you feel passionately about this, and you know what? And I'm glad we talked about it. As I say, I'm glad you came on the show to talk about it, and I think that people will respond one way or the other, and I welcome that. Of course, I welcome that, because why wouldn't anybody be prepared to have a conversation? So I thank you for coming on, and I thank you for telling your story, and hopefully we're still friends.
Yes, no, we definitely are.
Okay, lady, take it easy, right? Cheers, then. Bye. Well, she certainly got a point. Many of them, in fact. I'm not going to relitigate. I'll just say that I see my, job as providing stories from the trail, whether or not people should be out there or not. Lily was very gracious to me and to Kate, but as you heard, she has a great hiking story and has a terrific way of putting her points across. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. Now it's Bounce, and as you're going to hear, Bounce's story takes on a whole new dimension this week. And I think you're going to understand, whether you agree with him being out there or not, that his journey is about so much more than the hike. Here's Bounce. And we're back on with Bounce. Hi, Bounce. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm kind of excited here because you just sent me a message saying you've done ridiculous amounts of miles through the Whites, and we'll come back to that in a second. But tell everybody where you are right now, because I remember this place so well.
Well, I'm sitting on the top of the Mahoosuc's Arm. Just climbed it. It's a wow.
It's an epic. It's an epic climb, isn't it? Straight after the Mahoosuc Notch. That's quite a long morning in it for only about a couple of miles, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, we left out of that Colonel shelter. We didn't get to the Goose, so we had a little bit of a walk over here first, and then
all right.
Then we did it. I mean, I had a buddy to go with, and I can't ask for. I was perfect. It was awesome.
It is. Do you know, there's something about try to explain to people what it's like going through the Notch, because people say it's the most difficult. I certainly didn't find it the most difficult mile. I found it the most interesting mile, because it's kind of a little bit of a riddle, isn't it? You have to work out the best way to do things depending upon the circumstances of the day.
Sure, it's a little rainy today. I mean, not bad, so it's a little slick. it's really a boulder climb, and you got to make a jump. I mean, it's the most technical hiking I've ever done on my hands. But I went through with a guy named Learning Curve, and he's kind of like Spider-Man, and he led the way. And God is good. I needed that.
It can be quite. I don't know what it's like when you're there, but now you're there now. But I remember last year it was pretty cool when we went through, and there's still some ice down in some of the darker parts there, isn't it? Because the sun just doesn't get through to it, does it?
Yeah. There's definitely snow and ice down in the bottom, and it's like you get to some parts, and it's like AC turns on, and then you go up a little bit, and it's like humidity hits you in the face, and then you go down, and it's freezing again. Yeah.
I think if there's one thing, I think that's if I could pick out one place I would spend a morning at, I think that was the one I'd like to do again one time, because I think it's such an exciting thing. And then that climb up, that hits you in the face as well, doesn't it? Because that is quite a severe climb, isn't it?
It was a lot more than I expected. I can be honest with you. It was tough. That was the notch. I would not consider that the hardest mile.
No.
I would put that arm on the list, though. That was tough.
And does it now? You somewhere near the top of Old Spec, or have I got my places wrong here? You anywhere near Old Spec?
I think Old Spec's ahead of me.
Right.
Not at Old Spec yet, but I'm at the top of the arm. I just hit the peak.
Well, I say Old Spec, from my memory in 2014 and last year, is the longest downhill. It seems endless. It really does. But talk about the last couple of days, because you've had a couple of epic days, haven't you? I can't hardly believe that mileage. So I haven't got my phone in front of me. So you tell me the miles you've done the last 2 days and where you went from.
Well, I took yesterday. Yesterday we just came out of Gorham, and I only went to 16 miles. And the day before that, I spent a 0 at the barn.
Yeah, sorry, I meant those 2 days before that. Yeah, sorry.
Prior to that, my phone started to die, and I was having a rough time with downtime, just sitting around shelters. And the people that I was walking with, I was getting to their final destination at lunchtime, and breaks are just really for me now, and not burning off all this extra energy. So I just kept it going, and I couldn't sleep very well. So I was getting up really early and putting in really long days. I think one was a 27, the other one was a 28 to leave the whites. But I did an 8 mile out. I left from Ill Shelter or Ilk. I forget his name. It was 8 miles into Gorham.
Right.
I couldn't quite make. Yeah. So it was just a 28 and a 27.
Wow.
Which were tough, but.
And so why did you? Because you said you were going to slow down. Why did you do that?
Well, I mean, I did try to slow down. I was walking with Sam. Her name's Slow as Molasses, and she's been up here before. But when I just with quitting alcohol and marijuana, that's what I used to do to keep myself calmed down or slowed down or whatever. It was just whatever crutch I wanted to make it. And it's been 8 days now since I've had anything, and it was just really hard this first couple of days. And the only thing I could do to sleep and not to have that feeling of anxiety and stuff is just keep walking. And that's all I knew what to do.
Wow. I tell you what, that's a tough area to be walking for about 55 miles. But talk to that then. Last week I said to you that I thought you sounded pretty down. And I said afterwards, I thought you sounded pretty down. And then, of course, I saw your post on Facebook. So... And the difference in your eyes was quite startling, to be honest with you. How do you feel after quit? Did you just go cold turkey? And why did you choose to just go cold turkey then?
I've been working on it. That was I kept it to myself, but that was my original goal of the AT personally,
right?
To figure it out, go in the woods and just kind of figure it out,
right?
And I just wasn't figuring it out, to be honest. I was going the wrong way. I was carrying a bottle of whiskey. I got to a point where I'm drinking a pint of whiskey doing 30s. It just was really not good. Yeah. And I was sitting at one of the hostels I don't want to name because I'm not very happy with them, and watching what was going on. And I was like, at one point it just clicked. I said, why am I here with these people right now? And I looked down, and right there was my grinder that I grind up marijuana with. And right there was a beer, a PBR, was the last one of the first 15 pack that we were going to finish.
Right.
And it just clicked. I said, that's why I'm here. Those two things right there. and I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be around that situation and those people. And it just was like, what are you doing? You know, what are you doing? And it just clicked. I don't know what happened. It just clicked. It finally just clicked.
Wow. You know, and I can't imagine this is easy. I drink every single day. I don't drink heavily. I used to drink very heavily, but I don't drink heavily every single day. I drink 2-3 glasses of wine, maybe a martini, but that's enough. You know, it's more than enough for most people. And to just go cold turkey, I would have found that really, really difficult. And the fact that you used to smoke dope as well. So what does the walking do for you? It just takes your mind off it, or what?
No, the anxiety, the feeling that you get when, like, those first 2 days. I'm gonna tell you, the day that I talked to you last, I was on like day 1 or 2, and that was terrible. The feeling you get, you want it, and so you can think about, you know, you can get it. I'm capable. I can walk off this mountain if I want to and find a ride to somewhere to get me what I want.
Yeah.
It was in charge of me. I can't control. I can't have 1 or 2 martinis a day and call it. If I'd have the first one, I'm looking for the 15th. This is how I am. Wow. I go all out at everything. And, you know, I don't know if I'll ever be able to just have 1 or 2. But for me, one goes with the other. You know, you smoke a little weed, you get a little buzz. Well, you want to raise it, you know, you want to get more wasted. And, you know, they're just one to two with me, and I just can't. I don't know.
Are you able to function? Were you able to? You've obviously done this for some period of your life. So, were you able to function in business when you were doing it?
Sure, very successfully. That's people loved me. They loved the party guy. You know, I take people. I was in sales in my last big money sales. So you take them to these bars. You have the credit card from the company. Spend $700-800 a night.
Oh yeah.
And that was all the time.
Yeah.
No big deal. Write it off. You know, put it in. They'll pay you back.
I used to do the same thing in London. I used to do exactly the same thing in London. It is a ridiculous lifestyle. I totally understand that. So, and what I thought was really interesting about your post, I may not have the same set of friends. That was interesting. Do you feel good about that? Do you feel okay about that? Because the reason I asked, because you had such fantastic response from people on there. I was reading all those comments and so on. It must have really touched you that people were so supportive of you as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hesitant to talk about it because it makes me get that frog in my throat. But
yeah.
the amount, I think people were waiting. They were just
take your time.
Excuse me.
It's okay.
But they were just waiting for it.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay. Well, look, I'm proud of you, man. I really am proud of you. So I know how bloody difficult it is. I come from a drinking family. My brother drank himself to death. So trust me, when I read that, I was sad for you, but I was happy for you at the same time as well. So I'm very pleased you've done this, and I'm pleased that. Mind you, 55 miles in a couple of days. I'll tell you what, man, we won't have you on the show much longer. You'll be finished soon. So,
I will be finished probably sooner than later, and you'll need somebody else. And then in the bottom of that message I sent you, Mr. President, he's also one of my Facebook friends.
Right,
he'd be the guy that I would love to take up the mantle because he's a former Google executive. He's working on his Triple Crown. Phenomenal guy. He's working with other Triple Crowners, working on a program to bring people that maybe don't think that they can hike, and I'd like to have him explain it to you when you talk to him. But
can you message him, say I will contact him, or somehow introduce us? Is that possible over message?
I'll broker it.
Okay, man. Well, look, man,
I'll do it through Facebook Messenger.
I tell you, you've done amazing things this last week, and I'm, doing those miles. If that's what it takes, that's what you got to do, And I just now you're in Maine. I mean, I just love Maine as well. So you just got some exciting times to come, haven't you? You really have. So have you reassessed when you think you may finished?
I don't know. I'm not even putting a clock on it. I'm just hiking, and I might not come off the mountain if I don't feel like I can go back into civil life right yet. So I don't know what will happen.
Right. Okay. Well, look,
I got to make sure that I can, handle, society and, everybody. I've been this guy since I'm 14 years old. I'm the party guy. Like I bring the fun. Well, I'm not going to be that way anymore. So how do I relate to others? And sure, I got tons of support, but I also noticed who who I know who's struggling that didn't, like the message or give me the support. And I don't want them to think that I'm judgy or, one of those guys that like, I quit now, you need to.
No,
it's not like that.
It's not like that. And everybody comes to that point at some stage and they choose to go through that window or not go through that window, don't they? And that's their entire decision. And so it resonated with me very, very much. So I really appreciate you putting that on there. And I'm glad it kind of explained to me what was going on with you, because I knew I felt like there was something, and I'm just so glad that you feel good about your decision. And I think you hiking like a bloody maniac, 55 miles in 2 days. I can't even get over that concept in the whites as well. But look, you have a great week, okay?
Well, I'll tell you what, absolutely, you too. I was just say, quit drinking cold turkey, and you can do some crazy things.
That is hilarious. Funny. Okay, man. Well, you take it easy, all right? And we'll catch up again soon, right? Cheers, then.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
So, got a bit personal there, both for me and for Bounce. As I say, I love booze, but it can do some pretty nasty things to you. I totally understand where he's at, and I can relate in so many ways. I hope that you can too. I wanted to thank you once again for your kind donations to the show. We're moving to a new Hiking Radio Network website with much more about all our hiking shows over the weekend. But if you'd like to donate this week, go to mightyblueontheat.com, click on the podcast page and scroll to the donate button. Thank you so much. And now, Erin, I'm not even going to give this a build-up. Just believe me, we've never had anything like this on the show before. Here's Erin. Now, you may remember Erin Mackenzie from an earlier episode. She's a young woman who hiked the AT with one of her dogs and many other trails with, I think, up to 5 dogs at a time. Hi, Erin. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Well, I was kind of nervous to ask you how you were, because I know you're not really. You've had an amazing thing happen to you recently, haven't you? And I wanted you to tell people about it, and also your lesson that you took away from it as well, and how you feel about it now. Tell us what happened, and well, let's just leave it to you to tell your story.
So I guess it was just over 2 weeks ago. I decided to go for a run, and I run all the time. I live in Dauphin, so I'm very close to one of Canada's most beautiful parks. It's Riding Mountain National Park. Right. So I get to frequent that every day. And 2 Mondays ago, I decided to go for a run around a lake called Moon Lake, which is one of my favorite trails. And I go there every couple days. So... Sorry, my dog is drinking.
I can. Yeah.
He just fell on the ground. Yeah. Okay.
It's okay.
So I drove up there, and it's pretty routine for me to go out and just run because I do it every day. And I took 4 of my dogs with me, and the trail around Moon Lake is about 10 kilometers long. Right. So when we got there, we just, I put my headphones on and started my run. And the bugs up here in Dauphin are really, really bad this year. So that was partially why I decided to wear my headphones, because hearing the bugs hit your face and fly into your ears for 10 kilometers is quite miserable.
Sure.
So I had my dogs with me, and they're really well trained. They were running about 3 or 4 feet in front of me in a single file down the trail. It's quite a narrow trail, so we don't actually all fit on it unless we're in a line. So we were about 4.5 kilometers into the run, and I was going up a fairly steep little climb. Uh-huh. And I got to the top of this little hill, and I pretty much collided with a black bear. A black bear came out of the trail, and the bushes along Moon Lake, they're really thick. So when you're on the trail, you're pretty much in a green tunnel.
Yeah.
So this black bear came out of the bush right to my left, maybe about a foot in front of me. So we really almost did hit one another.
How big was it?
It was hard to tell because all I saw I looked up because I was looking at my feet as I was running, and look up, and all of a sudden I'm literally face to face with a black bear, and it hit me in the face with its paw. And so I don't quite remember what happened right after that, but I do remember screaming really loud because it scared me so much, and it hurt a lot when it hit me in the face.
Okay.
And then it stood up on its back legs, and it was easily as tall as me. I'm 5'7", so
Right.
it wasn't a small bear, but it wasn't a huge bear. I would probably say it was maybe 2 years old.
So hang on, you said it stood up. Did it to kind of rear up at you, or what was it?
Yeah,
What was it looking to do?
stood up. I think just kind of to assess like what had just happened, because I don't think me and the bear even knew what was going on at
Right.
the time. We both scared each other so bad. My dogs didn't even know what had happened. They had no idea that the bear had come out of the bush because they were already ahead of it
Right.
on the trail. They only would have realized anything was going on when I screamed. And that's when the bear stood up, and then it took off. The whole thing only lasted probably maybe 2 seconds. Like, it was so quick how it all unfolded. As soon as the bear ran away, my dogs came back to check on me, and I was scared because all I could see was blood coming down onto my clothes and my shoes. And so I actually took my camera, like I had my phone with me because I was listening to the music, and I turned the camera around on myself to look at my face because I know I had been hit in the face. And that was when I actually freaked myself out more by doing that because all I could see was blood. And
I don't know, I'm laughing, sorry.
and it really, I probably shouldn't have even done that, but I didn't know how bad the damage was to my face.
You showed a picture also on Facebook of your back as well, didn't you? What happened there?
Yeah, so I don't know. I actually didn't know that I had been hit by the bear in the back until I got to the hospital. The doctors and the nurses said, "Well, what happened to your back?" And I said, "I don't know. Maybe I scraped it on a tree or a branch?" Because I'm always getting cut up running through the trails.
Right.
But then when I looked at it myself, I saw 5 claw marks. So I guess at some point, either before or after the bear hit me in the face, it also swiped me on the back.
Right.
I don't remember falling down, and I really don't recall losing consciousness at all. But that part is, I have been thinking about it for a couple weeks. I still don't know what happened there.
You've been thinking about it for a couple of weeks, really?
Yeah.
Well, I can tell everybody that I'm looking at Erin right now on the screen. You can't see, obviously, because it's a podcast, but your scar, because you showed the picture of you with the blood. I mean, that was pretty bad. But I can hardly see any scar at all there. It's amazing, and it's really healing fast.
Yeah, it's healing really quick. The doctors decided not to put stitches in because of a risk of infection, because it's an animal claw.
Of course, yes.
So I got the steri strips that held the cut together, and that they worked amazing. And the only thing that I'm really still dealing with right now is I don't have any feeling in my nose, because I guess that there's nerve damage. The claw went quite deep under the side of my nose.
You could have lost your nose easily, couldn't you? Oh my gosh.
And even more than that, I could have lost my eye. The way that the claw hit, it really hit me right at the corner of my eye and then traveled down my face to the bottom of my nose. So
can you tell, how did it feel? Have you been? I presume you have been hit in the face before by friends when you were kids, but that must have been felt like a massive assault, didn't it?
It was, yeah. As soon as it happened, or I guess as soon as it was over, I called my mom because I was so scared, and I remember telling her, I think it broke my nose because I was in pain. I've never been hit in the face that hard, but it didn't break it. I think I was a little bit in shock too. But I had about 5 kilometers left to run or hike back to my car after the attack. So she stayed on the phone with me the entire time just to make sure I was conscious and okay and that the bear wouldn't come back. And so, yeah, that was when I got back to the car and my boyfriend picked me up there and took me to the hospital. But I've said it many times in other interviews. I 100% believe the bear was just scared and it reacted out of fear. If it had wanted to hurt me, it would have killed me. And it certainly could have. I mean, just this one hit to the face with its paw, I don't even think that it wanted to. I think that it was just an instinctual reaction. And, So
what do they have to check for? Because, I'm sure that quite apart from the fact that it hurts, there's a danger of animals' DNA getting in there or stuff from under their claws. What do they check you for? Do you know?
I think my tetanus was up to date. I don't remember them really checking anything. They just cleaned it out really well and made sure that I knew how to watch for infection afterwards.
Wow.
So
I tell you, you have healed up amazingly well. Has this put you off going back onto the trail, or how is it? Has it made you more nervous about it, or what?
It's definitely made me more cautious. I still run and I still do wear my headphones. I don't really think that there's a lot I could have done differently to prevent it, except maybe try to make more noise. But I think it was just an odd set of circumstances where, the bear was on top of a hill and it was most likely pretty windy that day. I don't really know if it could have heard me coming.
I was probably more scared of you. Probably not more scared of you than you were of it, but I bet it was just as scared of you.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm definitely more cautious, though. I'm more aware of my surroundings now. I think that over the years of hiking, I've become a little bit too comfortable walking, and you tend to let your guard down, as we all do. But it's a good reminder that we are in their home, and very quickly something could go wrong like that, So, and it's funny too, because my dogs are really accustomed to being outside in the bush, and they smell bears and moose and all sorts of animals every day. So for them not to have any kind of reaction if they had smelt it close to us isn't unusual, because it's something that happens often that we're in their proximity, probably not that close, but I think the dogs were only focused on the run and staying ahead of me, as they usually are when we go out running, because I run pretty quick. So I don't know. I'm now when they stop and they look ahead, I kind of get a little bit more spooked now, because I'm reliving that and how quickly it all happened. But for the most part, I'm still out hiking and enjoying the trails.
Good. Well, look, I reached out to you pretty quickly, but we took a little while to get this get the technology together here, but it seems to have worked out. And I'm so pleased how well you look, because you did look pretty bad that day, and it was such a good post. And you say you've been on TV now as well.
Yeah, a couple different news outlets wanted to interview me, so
cool.
That was all in the couple days after. Yeah.
That's cool. Well, look, lovely to speak to you again. And I really thank coming on the show. So I wanted to record you because your attitude is I believe the right attitude. You just have to be aware we're in their land, aren't we?
Yeah.
And you happen to be so close to them, but that's a nightmare for me to thought of being 1 foot from a bear. Oh my gosh.
I know. Yeah. No, you don't really expect that to happen. So
yeah. Okay, Erin. Well, look, good to talk to you, and hopefully it won't happen again.
Thank you very much for having me.
Take it easy. Bye.
Bye.
How about that? What a shocker, eh? 1 foot away from a frightened bear. I know that I and other hikers always say don't worry about bears, and that's still pretty darn true. Yet Erin's encounter just reminds us that we're living among wild animals out there, and very rarely something like this can happen. She just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And as you heard, she wasn't criticising the bear at all. She was a lucky girl, I can tell you. Finally today, it's Keith Foskett's Balancing on Blue. When I spoke with Keith, he wanted me to point out to the American audience that some of the humour may be a little British. If you're not used to some of that by now, then you're never going to be. I've got to tell you, there is a story in this opening chapter that cracked me up. It took me about 5 takes not to laugh. Just listen out for the story of the cat and the telephone. Enough said. I'll see you next week. Balancing on Blue by Keith Foskett. Chapter 1, The Converging. Peter, PJ, Semo. I had to tell her, but I couldn't muster the courage. At each attempt to break the news, I aborted and delayed for another 10 minutes, which didn't arrive. I failed earlier as she left for work, and again when she returned. Do it, PJ. Get it out of the way. I can't. Tell her now. Time's running out. I realise that. Do it. I will. I'll tell her when we go to bed. I looked at my wife as she fell asleep. I had only minutes, but I still delayed the inevitable. This is your last chance. You won't get another one. I know. Turning towards her and fighting tears, I broke the silence. I have to catch a train tomorrow. I'm leaving to hike the Appalachian Trail. Jess sat up quickly. What? I explained calmly, thinking composure would soften the news. And you're going to just leave me? Yes, I'm sorry. She crossed her arms. Say nothing? Did you plan on telling me? I peered sheepishly into her eyes, sensing her anger and sadness. I'm telling you now. I'd already packed and went to the closet. You got a new backpack too? Yeah. She hovered, making me nervous. If you wait, you won't do it. Don't stall. I grabbed my stuff. I told her I loved her, but this meant goodbye. Can we love someone and leave them for good? When will you be back? Why ask me this if I intended to leave? I paused before answering, unwilling to remind her in case she'd misunderstood. I don't know. Should take 6 months tops. Avoiding further eye contact, I left and walked to the Amtrak station. I was born Peter John Semo, but my neighbour Tom nicknamed me PJ as a baby. The nickname helped avoid confusion as I shared Peter with my father. I'm grateful for it. It fits. I decided to hike the Appalachian Trail, the AT for short, when I turned 16. Returning from a family camping trip, I experienced my first taste of life dissatisfaction. In one corner, Jess, my girlfriend then, suggested I move to South Dakota when I finished high school, and she often phoned my family's house to persuade them to let me go. My family pulled me in the opposite direction, urging me to Pennsylvania to attend college as my siblings had done. Neither side shied from their opinions. My father lectured me during long drives to go fishing. Trapped in the car, I had no choice but to listen, and it infuriated me. Jess and my family loved me, which was comforting but also the problem. They'd arranged plans A and B, but I needed one of my own, a different idea. My vision, not anyone else's. I wanted a plan C. It involved hiking long distance, so far people would think it impossible. I eventually decided to live with Jess in South Dakota. My family reacted angrily, and on the day before my departure, I ended up fighting with my brother. My father broke us apart. I don't want you to leave, he sobbed. They drove me to the airport. We all cried as I retrieved my luggage from the trunk. I remember my father holding me tightly and patting my back. It was the last time I'd see him. Still clueless, I didn't know whether to stay with Jess on arrival, return to Pennsylvania after a couple of weeks, or work more on Plan C. Landing at Detroit to change planes, I pondered fleeing into the big city, going somewhere, anywhere. It's Detroit, for God's sake, you'll get killed. As my plane neared South Dakota, Plan C became urgent. Her parents collected me at the airport, leaving no time for a getaway or a last-ditch escape to the American Discovery Trail. We married later that year, but my family stayed away. We still weren't speaking because of my decision to move. It was so dire, I said, "F*** you" on the phone to my father. Those proved to be the last words we ever shared. I worked in retail, which became bearable, my good-spirited colleagues making up for any career disappointments. I heard my father had pancreatic cancer, possibly terminal, so I applied for a leave of absence to see him. Owing to misunderstandings between my employer and my father's doctor, the paperwork was delayed. It finally arrived the day after he passed away. The train lurched as the brakes squealed, and I woke from napping. I considered Harper's Ferry as the halfway mark of the AT. Nestled at the confluence of the Potomac and Shenandoah rivers, it's an important target for thru-hikers. I dozed off several times but smiled as I saw the Harper's Ferry sign. I knew its significance and thought it's a good omen I'd woken there. I disembarked at Gainesville. It was late and dark, and looking around for inspiration, I spotted another hiker and we got talking. We shared a taxi to Amicalola Falls State Park, where an approach trail led 9 miles to Springer Mountain and the true start of the AT. I spent the night in a hostel, and in the morning I hiked, treading carefully. I'd researched a running and walking style called pose, which reduced injuries. I found my feet and eased my body in gently for the mammoth task ahead. People overtook me, but I didn't care. It wasn't a race. A guy with a silver umbrella passed me and smiled, nodding a greeting. "You walk carefully. It's interesting to watch. What's your name?" He spoke with a funny accent. "PJ," I replied. "And yours?" "Fozzie. Nice to meet you." "You British?" His stride slowed and I expected him to stop, but he didn't. "Yes, English to be exact. See you later, I expect." "For sure. It's all good." I rested, drank some water, digested recent events and looked skyward. I don't ask the universe for much, but I'm grateful to be here. Please accept my faults and mistakes and let me do something rewarding. Make my family proud. Help me finish this adventure. Give me a shot and lead my footsteps in the right direction. Philip Lasagna Colelli. I was well qualified in fort and dam construction. It was hard work digging, chopping and moving fallen trees to build a fortress, but I enjoyed it. When you're a kid, surveying the small moat, flanked by your impregnable garrison, your achievement is huge and life is rewarding. As a youngster, my father took me camping. Not in the wilderness, but a flat area of gravel next to the car with a fire ring was just as exciting. We had a massive tent, coolers packed with drinks, hot dogs, hamburgers, eggs, bacon, oatmeal and condiments. All the comforts and luxuries a boy needs right on his own private patch. I didn't know about the AT, but my father and uncle spent time there. Curiosity defeated me years later. Dad had guidebooks for the North Carolina and Pennsylvania sections, and I often studied them. The maps intrigued me. The route, a series of red dashes, played with black contour lines, passed the blues of rivers and lakes and climbed mountains. I was still young when Dad agreed to a short hike on the trail, and we parked at Trent's Grocery a few miles from Bland, Virginia. The instant we started, the beauty of the woods enveloped me. I felt at peace in the calm surroundings. Passing the Kimbling Creek Suspension Bridge and Dismal Falls, we battled steep hills until too exhausted to continue. We hastily pitched our tent as the storm threatened, cooked a simple dinner on the camp stove and read our books. I fell asleep, tired from the exertion. I didn't return to the AT for years, as if reading one chapter from a fine book before setting it aside. I had a miserable job at a burger bar and became good friends with a co-worker, Sam Ridge, who wanted to thru-hike the entire trail the following year. Before long, we agreed on a trial trip to indulge our curiosity. We hiked into the Great Smoky Mountains National Park on a 40-mile section of the AT from Newfound Gap to Davenport Gap. I spotted wildlife and smelt the mountain air as my lost memories rekindled. We reached Ice Water Spring Shelter and arranged our sleeping mats and bags. After eating and chatting with other hikers, I slept but woke in the night, astonished at the clarity and brightness of the night sky away from town. Reinvigorated in both body and mind, we hit the ridge of the Smoky Mountains, with Tennessee on our left, North Carolina to the right, and epic views in all directions. I'd reopened that book from long ago, and it was time for the next chapter. I decided to attempt the AT, and Sam encouraged me. I focused on the hike. Work became more mundane, and I quit a month early because I hated it so much. I stayed in touch with Sam. We agreed to start together, but we'll make our own plans once there. We spoke often, planning, discussing gear, and took various day hikes around the area. Each day, I repeated a 5-mile loop on a local track 3 times to get fit. It proved repetitive and tiresome, especially in the rain, but I persisted to increase my fitness and test my resolve. I had to know I could persevere. The final week dragged, and I went crazy waiting. I don't enjoy wishing my life away, but I long for the woods again. We arrived at Amicalola Falls and continued a few miles before camping, completing the short distance to Springer Mountain the following day. At last, I'd returned to the woods. Sam Daffy Ridge. Many hike the Appalachian Trail to see some of the world. I hiked to get away from it. Needing to change and escape my conventional life, I yearned for something different. My school had kicked me out for selling weed from my dorm room, and the police arrested me. I don't remember them taking my mugshot, but when I saw it, I'd been crying. Since age 15, I'd sold cannabis and dodged trouble. I'm not proud, it's just how things turned out. Every time I got into hot water, I chastised myself and tried to stop dealing, but I couldn't. I woke in a jail cell with a bunch of drunks. I felt as they looked. Terrible. At 5 a.m. I phoned my dad. I didn't want him to know, but only he could get me out. I must have called 10 times before he answered. They released me 12 hours later on a crash course to reconstruct the pieces of my life. I had to repay the bail and $3,000 my grandmother had lent me to pay for school, which I spent on weed. I was ashamed I'd failed her and lost my father's trust in one stupid moment of madness. I questioned my motive for selling and financial gain. Why the hell did I need money? To buy stuff to look cool? Make others think me a better person? I considered money and status high priorities. That's what we're led to believe, but they've led us the wrong way. I worked in a burger bar, but apart from the wage, I questioned why I needed to work. No good reason was forthcoming, and disillusioned, I wanted out. Money wasn't a priority. I approached it from another angle and abandoned my ambitions to gain financial status. In retrospect, during this period I acquired the knowledge which prepared me for trail life. I read Walden by Thoreau and Dead Poets Society by Kleinbaum, to name two. I found a one-room place with a shared bathroom and made do with one fork, knife, spoon and plate. Far from striving to have as much as possible, I sought simplicity. It was fun, enlightening, and even after the AT I continued to live this way. It's rewarding, like I'm still on the trail. I loved the outdoors, so it seemed the best environment for my trip. While planning the hike, I wanted to escape from people, but I soon learnt that they made the adventure. Without them, I couldn't have hiked the AT nor had such an extraordinary experience. With all that time out, the space to think, I believed I'd figure my life out, maybe figure life itself out. But do we ever achieve this? Our paths ebb and flow, but we rarely find answers. All I needed, at a basic level, was fun. It would be tough, versatile and dynamic, even hallucinogenic. Giddy groundlessness kept me alive. I could meet anyone from anywhere and do anything. We wanted to reach the final mountain on the same trail, but we all have different reasons. I figured conformity was dangerous, and the police, school and authorities had harmed me more than I had anyone else. I needed to get away from urban areas so I could be myself and not be crucified for it. Call it hiding if you will. I just dreaded meeting someone who was there for the same reasons. John Thirsty Bashara. A Bachelor of Arts was a fancy piece of paper confirming little more than I'd spent 7 years and an obscene amount of money earning it. There were great experiences and personal development along the way, but it wasn't as satisfying as I'd hoped. All the effort and no career prospects, which suited me because I didn't want one. Realising the time I'd wasted, I craved the opposite, something outrageous, even stupid. I considered several options. Leave my house and see where the wind blew me. Devise a master plan to organise a criminal conspiracy. Continue working my comfortable but boring job or hike the AT. Option 1 lacked structure. Maybe I wouldn't even make it out of the city and the entire romanticised adventure would fail before starting. Number 2 attracted me, but I had no experience in such matters. Work was out of the question. It didn't even come within the outrageous, different or stupid bracket. By simple elimination, that left the AT. I flew into Atlanta with nothing as I'd sent my gear ahead. There were 6 hikers on the shuttle and a further 16 at the hostel. The anticipation was infinite as a culmination of training, research and hard work came to fruition. Eagerness came easily. Sleep didn't. I started at Amicalola Falls, where many begin, as it's the official thru-hiker registration point. A wide-eyed, cheerful guy wearing a Packers hat and a University of Minnesota shirt caught my eye. I smiled as I'd just come from Minneapolis. Small world. I saw him again at Fontana Dam, 182 miles in. His trail name was Bush Goggles, and we became great friends, hiking much of the route together. Holed up in the Fontana shelter with a few others, we enjoyed a beer and spoke animatedly before heading into the Smokies. We partied that night and had a raging fire next to the reservoir. It rained the next day, so to dry out, a few of us headed for a local church who'd advertised accommodation. We waited by the road for a ride, wet and miserable, failing to roll a cigarette in the damp conditions. A British guy I'd also met at Fontana Dam, Fozzie, strolled by casually under his umbrella, as if walking the dog on a Sunday morning. He smiled and carried on. "Fozzie," I called after him. "Yeah?" "A guy called Bush Goggles is ahead. We're staying at the church place tonight. Please tell him we ain't going to make camp later." He paused, digesting my request, and cried, "What's his name again?" I shouted out once more, "Bush Goggles." "Okay, will do." Dallas, Bush Goggles, Nustvold. My grandpa spent his retirement scrapping and junking. He'd dismantle stuff like decrepit lawnmowers and refrigerators, salvaging the valuable metals. Helping him as a young boy, I enjoyed finding value in trash. Visiting friends' houses and sorting through their junk, we even found collectible antiques. This grounding gave me an eye to spot treasure. I watched shows such as Time Team and nurtured an ambition to become Indiana Jones. I loved exploring outside. Spotting animals such as deer, watching an eagle soar or playing with plants were my other treasures. Nature awed me. Still too young to go adventuring on my own, I lived vicariously through the classics like Robinson Crusoe and The Count of Monte Cristo to feed my passion. My outlook changed in high school after my mum fell sick. The doctors had no clue for ages, but finally diagnosed lupus. What a wake-up call. I rethought my life plans. Did I want to work until I got ill or died, or should I defy conformity and have fun? I read Bill Bryson's A Walk in the Woods, my introduction to the AT, which planted a seed. As I spent college experimenting with drink, dabbling in drugs and chasing women, that seed didn't grow. Lucky enough to be an annoying student who skipped class, I studied little but still got great grades. Between semesters I worked for my uncle's environmental contracting company as a general labourer, busting down walls and removing hazardous waste. I felt lost after graduating, so when he offered me a supervisory role for a better salary, I jumped to the chance. I was a kid again. Being the first into ancient buildings that had lain dormant for years, I explored those dusty time capsules. As the guys worked, I discovered old beer bottles, newspapers, pictures and great items like electric fans from the 1920s. I removed the scrap copper and aluminium to make extra cash. After 9 months, I'd saved enough, and the desire to sprinkle more water on that AT seed returned. I had no idea what I was getting into. I was familiar with camping, but seldom for more than a week. As at college, I did little research. In fact, my only preparation amounted to me buying the gear and asking my mum if she could drive me the 18 hours to Georgia. She had her lupus under control, but she battled it daily. I appreciated her light around me and her encouragement to hike the trail. If I'd known then how great that summer turned out, I'd have hiked the AT years earlier. Chris Juggles Chiappini. It was August the 3rd and 2 minutes before my act at the World Juggling Championships in Montreal, Canada. My nerves were shot and my dad knew it as he tried settling me. I'd competed the previous year at the same competition, hosted nearby at Niagara Falls, and earned bronze. Holding a ball and waving a hand fan underneath, releasing thousands of confetti pieces, formed part of my act. This entailed handling a delicate cellophane ball filled with the confetti. It was fragile. Even a sneeze could split the cellophane, spilling the contents. I sweated and shook, aware I shouldn't grip it too tightly. "Chris, do you need help?" "No, Dad, I got it." I made it with seconds to spare. I was 10 years old when I started juggling. I have no comprehension of life without this passion. It's ingrained in me. As a boy, I soon glimpsed where it could take me, and it became my identity. It's difficult to master, but I learned quickly, realised others liked watching me, and I enjoyed the praise. As a kid, applause is marvellous, and the pleasure doesn't diminish as an adult. My dad encouraged me because he's also an artist, a musician. He knows how tough carving a career in the arts can be, especially a skill as unique as juggling, but it's rewarding. Although he inspired me, he didn't force me, leaving me free to make my own choices. It's a solitary pastime. To succeed in the field requires thousands of hours in a high-ceilinged room, repeating the same trick until it's second nature. Pushing myself mentally and physically to learn new skills, I had to hold routines for long periods. I never had a coach. I just adhered to common practice principles and listened to those who were better than me. Josiah Jones finished his act and left the stage. He looked unhappy, as his performance had gone badly. In fact, it was a train wreck. He dropped a lot of props. They announced my name and I glanced at Dad, who smiled, suggesting he knew something I didn't. My heart pounded and my breathing quickened as I wiped away the sweat. The audience applauded and time slowed as I strolled confidently on stage. Dad and I took advantage of tricks to gain an edge. We'd even planned my costume of polished black shoes, smart pants and a red sequin shirt. I looked like Elton John. My movements were choreographed by a dance teacher through the 8-minute routine to 3 songs. She'd also taught me tricks that made a difference, like combing my hair while winking at the audience. I worked with balls, rings and clubs, varying the quantity of each. It went well. The crowd responded, and my dad looked excited. I felt confident, but not blasé, that my act stood a genuine chance. I had the least number of drops, 2, and the highest skill technique. It had to be gold. It's a strange comparison, but juggling has much in common with thru hiking. It demands physical and psychological strength, dedication, hours of repetitive action to arrive at a distant goal and toleration of a solitary existence. I loved the outdoors, but the solitude also appealed to me. Dedication and repetition I'd already mastered. I live 30 minutes from where the AT passes through Harriman State Park in New York State. I'd walked sections many times and made a failed 272-mile attempt on the Long Trail in Vermont. The AT was familiar, close to home and on the East Coast. I knew I'd be safe there. Several times in my life, elders have said to me, do what you want before you get married and have kids. We're taught that marriage and children are priorities and our dreams come second. I wasn't buying any of that. I did win gold at the World Juggling Championships, and now it's my living. As much as I love it, I don't know anything else. I have no other passions like juggling. One summer, needing a break from throwing balls in the air, I made a decision. The following spring, on top of Springer Mountain, I started hiking 2,240 miles. There's no gold for coming first. The only medal on the AT is for finishing. Keith Fozzie Foskett. The 1970s and interior design made perfect partners. Legendary wallpaper, majestic flooring and furniture was obtainable in bright orange. I was young at the time, but later in life I dove headlong into a 1970s revival for my lounge. An old British Telecom phone formed the centrepiece, complete with a rotary dial, and even the circular card displaying 999 Fire Police Ambulance was still intact. The two-tone chocolate-coloured body was immaculate. It lived on a white plastic table with an orange lamp, which completed my retro look. The drawback was the loud ringing. It startled the hell out of me, and my cat detested it. Invariably, he was relaxing on my lap when anyone called, and in a nanosecond he'd flip over, look at me with insane, crazed eyes, glaring at the phone, ready to dismember it. "Why did you buy that thing for?" One afternoon, I arrived home, walked into the lounge and found him asleep. Not unusual, as you'd imagine for a cat, but his location was. He lay on my white table, spooning the telephone. Now, I'm an animal lover, make no mistake, but it was too good a chance to miss. I quietly reached into my pocket, pulled out my cell phone, and dialed the house number. The point is that great opportunities come along rarely. Often we don't take them because we're scared that path might fail despite feeling it won't. Our lives have no quibbles. We've accepted our lot and don't wish to change. On the flip side, many of us feel stuck and lack the courage to make changes. Paying a mortgage, feeding the kids and carving careers are challenges in themselves without taking risks. Travelling, adventuring, finding yourself or escaping, call it what you will, the number of people fleeing the system has rocketed in recent years. We question how we're expected to live, and many don't want any part of it. Thus, fleeing, often into the wilderness, provides a chance to breathe, recharge and reevaluate. Without everyday life's commotion, focused thoughts come easily. Digesting their lives, many realise their mistakes, recognise the need to adapt, and after returning have the fortitude to follow through. Let me elaborate. Assume when you're born, a few minutes old, you can communicate and have an adult's intelligence. The delivery room doors squeak open and someone enters, dressed immaculately in a striped grey suit. Her shirt is as smooth and white as copier paper, ironed to a crisp finish with edges so precise they'd cut a finger. Brush marks line her slick black hair like a furrowed field as it's pulled into a tight ponytail, stretching her eyebrows. Gothic white foundation and lurid red lipstick complete her stark look. She screams perfection, and intimidated, you sense an authority is about to impose restrictions. Instinctively, you accept the sheets of paper she hands over and notice the main header, Life Contract. She places a clenched hand over her mouth and clears her throat delicately. "I'm from Life Planning," she begins, nonchalantly, waving her palm as if what follows is unimportant. "This is standard stuff. I need you to read and sign at the bottom." She sits by your bed, too close for comfort, shifting a stern gaze between you and the contract, and offers her pen. You read it, feeling uncomfortable, and yet you presume it's acceptable, like motor insurance terms. You summarise the content. At 5 years old, school begins and continues to age 16. You may wish to choose further education, which we encourage. You must strive to achieve the best grades. Obey your elders, always. Schooling complete, you will begin employment until retirement. Incentives such as paid annual holiday, a company pension and a subsidised cafeteria are available. We expect you to work hard for your employer, be punctual, stay late at your own cost and get along with your colleagues. Moving jobs is frowned upon. Your country is under the control of a government which passes laws you must abide by, regardless of whether you think them fair or not. You live in a democratic society but have little input. Every 4 years you vote for the incumbent party or others. Tax is deducted from your earnings, and depending on your salary, this could be nearly half your income. Goods and some services are also taxed. You have no say in the tax calculations or their investment. In your 60s, assuming your pension is healthy, you can retire. Your annuity may not be sufficient, in which case you should plan to rectify the shortfall or continue working. And so it goes on and on. I ignore her eyes drilling into me and her assumption I'll sign. Meeting her gaze, I smile and return the papers. Yeah, it's okay, thanks. I'll do my own thing. Of course, I did my time at school, and I have a day job when I'm not hiking. Much of conventional life I don't care for and have little choice in, but I accept it. When I discovered through hiking, a monumental void in my journey filled. I found freedom. I could travel the world and disappear into the wilds for a few months, with what I needed strapped to my back. My concerns about life during those times faded. The rules and regulations I'd endured and battled vanished. Away from civilization, I discovered a new pathway. Far from being oppressive, my surroundings were invigorating. Without restrictions, I revelled in immunity. Energised, my thoughts cleared and refined. My life direction clarified and my goals focused. I felt liberated.